Look, I don't date black women. Excuse me? You heard me.
Seoul, South Korea, Gangnam District, 11:47 p.m. The kind of night that didn't ask permission. Min-ho stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse. No, scratch that. He stood at the window of the private lounge on the 42nd floor of a building that had no public address, no listed name, and no guests who hadn't been personally approved by him first. The kind of place that existed in whispers only. Below, Seoul pulsed like a living thing. Neon signs bled into the Han River. Traffic moved in rivers of white and red light. Thousands of people down there, all of them ordinary, all of them safe in their ordinary lives. Min-ho was not ordinary. He hadn't been since he was 19. He pressed 2 fingers to the glass, cold against his skin, and watched the city he owned, not on paper, not officially, but in every way that mattered. The construction contracts, the nightclubs, the import routes nobody asked questions about, the judges who took his calls, the politicians who didn't. Kang Min-ho, 40 years old, 6'1", the kind of handsome that made people uncomfortable, sharp jaw, hooded eyes the color of dark amber, black hair swept back with the carelessness of a man who knew it didn't matter either way. His white dress shirt had the top 2 buttons open. On his left forearm, a serpent tattoo wound from his wrist to his elbow, the scales rendered in extraordinary detail by an artist in Tokyo who charged more per hour than most people earned in a month. On his right hand, across the knuckles, 4 Korean characters, Kal Puthyada Anus, endure. He had endured a great many things. The Lagos shipment cleared customs, said the man behind him. Park Jun, his second in command, tablet in hand, always efficient, always quiet. And the Itaewon location turned its first clean profit this quarter. Good. There's also a situation with the Busan crew. They're pushing on territory again. Let them push. Min-ho didn't turn from the window. Men who push without thinking always fall forward. June typed something, waited. The charity auction is tomorrow night. The Kim Foundation event in Insadong. You confirmed attendance 3 weeks ago. Your name is on the program. Min-ho said nothing. The Lee family will be there, if you don't show. I'll be there. He finally turned, and even June, who had seen this man do things that couldn't be undone, felt the particular weight of those amber eyes. Is there anything else? Nothing urgent. Then leave me. June left. Min-ho poured himself 2 fingers of scotch he didn't particularly want and sat in the leather chair nearest the window. On the table beside him was a photograph, face down. He didn't look at it. He never looked at it anymore, but he never moved it either. It was a photo of a woman. Not the woman, just the reminder of why he had built a wall around himself, so high that even he had stopped looking over it. He had loved once, deeply, catastrophically, in the way that only the young and the stupid manage. And she had used that love like a weapon, selling information to a rival organization that had cost him 3 men and nearly cost him his life. After that, he'd made a decision, not in anger, not dramatically, but the way a man makes a business decision, clean and final. No more. And specifically, after a string of complications with women of various backgrounds, he had narrowed his personal rule further following an incident in Jeju that he refused to think about. His inner circle had heard him say it plainly, without apology. I don't date outside my world, and I don't date black women. It wasn't hatred, it was armor. He told himself that often enough that he'd stopped questioning it. The next evening, Kim Foundation charity auction in Sadong Cultural Hall. Georgina Adami arrived 12 minutes late, which she would later claim was intentional, and which was actually the result of her taxi driver missing the turn twice and her phone dying before she could redirect him. She stood in the entrance for exactly 4 seconds, long enough for 3 men in expensive suits to turn and look, and for 2 of them to forget what they'd been saying. She was 30 years old, Nigerian Ghanaian, born in Lagos, raised partly in Accra, educated in London, and now 18 months into a consulting contract with a Seoul-based nonprofit that was trying to modernize cultural grant processes across West and East Africa. She was here tonight because her director, Dr. Choi, had insisted she represent their organization at the auction. She had almost worn the black dress, practical, safe, forgettable. She had worn the red one instead. It wasn't dramatic or revealing. It was simply asterisk perfect, fitted to the architecture of her body, the way a sentence fits its meaning, a deep crimson that pulled against the warm darkness of her skin and made her look like something that had arrived from another century, more certain, more alive. Her hair was in a high, elaborate braid, and she wore gold at her ears and wrists and nothing around her neck, because she had learned that some things didn't need decoration. She scanned the room for Dr. Choi, didn't see him, and moved toward the bar instead. She walked the way women walk when they have stopped trying to take up less space, unhurried, shoulders back, heels deliberate on marble. Min Ho saw her the moment she cleared the entrance. He was on the opposite side of the hall, mid-conversation with Chairman Lee, nodding at something about municipal development funds when the motion at the door registered in his peripheral vision. He just looked, automatic, the reflex of a man who always monitored his surroundings. And he stopped. Not visibly. Min Ho had a face that gave nothing away, but inside, something happened that he had no name for. Something shifted, like a piece of furniture moved in a room he'd memorized in the dark. He knew exactly where everything was, and suddenly he didn't. She was extraordinary. Not pretty, that word was too small, too tame. She was extraordinary the way certain things are, certain pieces of music, certain moments of light, certain truths you weren't ready to hear. Chairman Lee was still talking. Min Ho looked away from her, deliberately, the way you look away from something dangerous. No. The word rose in him automatic, clean, practiced. No. He returned his attention to Lee, laughed at something, made the appropriate response. He was good at this. He had spent 20 years being good at exactly this. Across the room, Georgina accepted a glass of sparkling water from the bartender, turned to survey the auction items along the far wall, and said quietly to herself, in the particular English-Yoruba hybrid her thoughts sometimes defaulted to when she was unimpressed. Letter 1EB9, J letter 1EB9, Karai O Huntai, W letter 1ECD, acute, and Nai. Let's see what they've got. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that he'd already looked away from her twice. She didn't know that the second time he looked away, his hand, steady in every boardroom, every backroom, every moment that had mattered in 40 years, had tightened almost imperceptibly around his glass. And she certainly didn't know that at that precise moment. A man in a gray suit at the edge of the hall was raising a phone to his ear and saying 3 words that would make this entire careful, distant, formal evening collapse into something else entirely. 3 words that would put Georgina directly in Min Ho's world. 3 words that would make his rule mean nothing. The phone went to Min Ho's earpiece at 8:43 p.m. The 3 words were, "She's the target." In Sadong Cultural Hall, 8:43 p.m. Min Ho didn't react. That was the first thing June noticed from across the room, that his boss received the message through his earpiece, and his face did absolutely nothing. No tightening of the jaw, no glance toward the exits, just the same composed, mildly interested expression he wore at events like this, the mask so practiced it had become architecture. But June had worked for this man for 11 years. He knew the difference between stillness and control. Min Ho was controlling something right now. June moved closer. "Repeat," Min Ho said quietly, barely moving his lips, the way men learn to speak when they've spent enough time in rooms where the walls listen. The voice in his ear belonged to Ryu, stationed outside. "The woman in the red dress. She came in alone. We ran her when she arrived, standard sweep. Her name flagged. Georgina Ademi. She's connected to the Choi Foundation. But there's a secondary flag. The Busan crew has her listed." Min Ho took a slow sip of his drink. Listed how? As a liability. She apparently worked in financial compliance in London before Seoul. 3 months ago, she was approached by an Interpol unit building a case against distribution networks in West Africa. We don't know if she cooperated. The Busan crew doesn't know either. That's the problem. The problem, yes. When people were uncertain about whether someone had talked, they tended to resolve that uncertainty with permanent solutions. Min-ho set his glass down on a passing server's tray without looking. He excused himself from Chairman Lee with a smile and a hand on the shoulder that communicated nothing except warmth and departure. He did not look at her. He looked at every exit. He counted the secondary entrances. He identified the 3 men in the room who didn't belong, 2 near the east corridor, 1 by the catering station, all too still, all watching the same woman while pretending not to. They're already inside. The thought arrived cold and efficient, not panic. Min-ho did not panic, but something underneath it, something he refused to name, tightened its grip. She was standing at the auction display wall now, head slightly tilted, reading the description card for a bronze sculpture with the focused expression of someone who actually cared about art. She had no idea. Her glass was at her lips. She was completely, dangerously unaware. He made a decision, not out of heroism. He told himself that clearly. This was his city. These were his people. The Busan crew were encroaching on his territory and using his events to conduct business. That was the reason. The only reason. He started walking. Georgina had just decided that the bronze sculpture was overpriced, and the description card was full of pretentious nonsense when someone stopped beside her. She registered him the way you register weather. Before you see it, you feel the change in pressure. She turned. Later, she would try to find honest language for what she experienced in that first second, and the honest language was this. Her body knew something her mind hadn't processed yet. Some old, accurate animal part of her, the part that predates reason, sent up a flare. He was looking at the sculpture, not at her, as if he had stopped here by accident. But she had spent enough time in rooms with powerful men to know that powerful men did nothing by accident. He was tall, broad through the shoulders in a way the tailored jacket couldn't quite contain. The tattoo on his forearm was visible where his sleeve was pushed slightly back, the serpent's head curling toward his wrist. His profile was almost unreasonably clean, jawline, cheekbone, the particular set of a mouth that had learned not to give things away. He smelled like scotch and something else, cedar, winter. "The card is wrong," he said, in English. Accented but precise, the way people speak English when they learned it from books before they learned it from people. Georgina raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "The description, it says this was cast in the Joseon period." He nodded at the sculpture. "The technique is modern. Someone authenticated it incorrectly or intentionally." She looked at the sculpture, then back at him. "You can tell that by looking at it. You can tell that by the patina on the base. Joseon bronze has a specific oxidation pattern. This one was artificially aged." He finally looked at her, and she had the distinct sensation of being measured, not the way men usually looked at her, not with want or assessment, but with something more unsettling, something that felt like calculation and curiosity at war. "You were about to spend 30 million won on a forgery." "I was about to do nothing of the sort. I'm here representing a nonprofit. I don't have 30 million won." Something moved across his face, almost, not quite a smile. "Kang Min-ho." He didn't extend his hand. He just said his name, flat and simple, as if it were a fact about the room. "Georgina Ademi." Now he did look at her, fully, directly, for exactly 2 seconds, the duration of something being confirmed. Then he looked back at the sculpture as if the moment had closed. "You should move toward the center of the room," he said quietly, "away from the east corridor." Georgina went very still. "I'm sorry." "There are men here who aren't guests. They've been watching you since you arrived." His voice hadn't changed. Same conversational register. Someone observing them from 3 feet away would think they were discussing the art. "Do exactly what I say and nothing will happen to you." She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her, the specific lurch of reality rearranging itself. "Who are you?" she said. "Someone who currently has more interest in keeping you alive than they do." He picked up a card from the display table and studied it, the picture of bored, wealthy leisure. "Walk with me, slowly. Tell me about the sculpture as we go. Laugh once as if I've said something amusing. You haven't said anything amusing. Then pretend. The amber eyes found hers for one moment. Please. It was the asterisk please that moved her. From a man who looked like he hadn't said that word in years, it landed with unexpected weight. She laughed. It was genuine, which surprised her. Some dark, absurd current running under the terror, finding the situation almost funny in its extremity. She picked up her own card and they walked together toward the center of the hall, and she spoke about the sculpture she'd been examining, and Min Ho responded in kind. And to every eye in the room, they were simply two people at a charity auction, finding each other mildly interesting. Except that his hand was at his phone. Except that across the room, the man she'd never met named Park Jun had angled himself between Georgina and the East Corridor without appearing to move at all. What did I do? She said, voice low. Still looking at the cards. Nothing. You may have been in proximity to something. It's not confirmed. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be accurate. He paused. Are you working with any law enforcement agencies? The question landed like a stone in still water. She felt the ripple of it go through her. That's an extraordinary thing to ask a stranger, she said carefully. Yes. She said nothing. The answer matters, he said, still quiet, still composed. Not for the reason you're thinking. She looked at him then, really looked, the way she'd been deliberately not doing since he appeared beside her. He met her gaze and held it, and she understood with a certainty she couldn't entirely explain that this man was not the threat. He was something else, something she didn't have clear language for yet. I was approached, she said. 3 months ago in London, I didn't cooperate. He absorbed this. You didn't cooperate, or you didn't cooperate yet. I didn't cooperate. Full stop. I'm a financial consultant. I have no interest in becoming anything else. A long pause. The auction host's voice rose somewhere behind them, beginning the formal program. Guests drifted toward the presentation area. The room reorganized itself around the moment. One of the men near the catering station has moved, Min Ho said softly. Georgina didn't turn to look. She had an instinct for self-preservation that had been developed growing up in Lagos, refined in London, and apparently needed again right here in Seoul at a charity auction in a dress she'd almost not worn. What does that mean for us? Us, the word left her mouth before she thought about it. He noticed. She saw it, the faintest reaction, somewhere in the vicinity of his eyes. It means we're leaving, he said. Together you'll have questions. I have questions now. I'll answer them. He turned to face her fully for the first time, and up close, the impact of him was different, less the polished surface of the powerful man and more the texture underneath, the slight tension around his jaw, the way his hand had moved to the small of her back without touching her, hovering there, ready, but not here. She should have said no. She should have called Dr. Choi. She should have gone to the event security, explained the situation, let whatever official machinery existed handle it. She knew this. She also knew, with the same animal accuracy that had gone off like a flare when he first appeared, that the official machinery in this room, in this city, in this particular situation, was likely slower than whatever this man was. All right, she said. They moved toward the side entrance, unhurried, measured. Behind them, the auction host announced the first lot. Behind them, the man from the catering station spoke into a phone. And behind them, unnoticed in the warm, moneyed noise of the hall, a second figure rose from a service chair and followed. Not Min Ho's man. Not Georgina's. Someone else entirely. Someone who had been waiting for precisely this moment, when Kang Min Ho chose to involve himself. Someone who had been waiting years for Min Ho to care about something again. Because a man who cares about nothing is impossible to break. But a man who moves across a room for a woman in a red dress. That man has found his weakness. And somebody in this city had been hunting for that weakness for a very long time. In Sadong Side Street, 9:11 p.m. The night air hit Georgina like cold water, sharp, clarifying, real. She had walked out of a charity auction with a stranger who had tattoos and amber eyes, and the particular calm of a man who had navigated dangerous situations so many times that danger had simply become weather to him. She had done this willingly. She was currently getting into a black car that had appeared at the curb with the timing of something that had been waiting, and she was doing that willingly too. "What are you doing, Georgina?" It wasn't a question. It was an observation. The kind her mother made in that specific tone, not alarmed, just watching, head tilted, letting her daughter arrive at her own conclusions. The car door closed. The city disappeared behind tinted glass. Min-ho sat beside her, not close, leaving a deliberate distance that she noticed precisely because it was deliberate. He was on his phone immediately, speaking Korean in short, clipped sentences. She understood perhaps 20% of it. Her Korean was functional but not fluent, good enough for grocery stores and workplace small talk, not for whatever register this was. She caught 3 of them, east side. Deal with it quietly. She looked out the window. In Sadong's narrow streets slid past, the old architecture lit softly, Pajangmacha tents glowing amber at the corners. Seoul at night always made her feel 2 things simultaneously: the deep comfort of a city that never fully slept, and the loneliness of being the person most awake in it. Min-ho ended the call. Silence. Not uncomfortable, which was the strange thing. It should have been uncomfortable, it had every right to be. Instead, it sat between them like something patient. "You're not going to thank me," he said. Statement, not question. "Should I?" "Most people would." "Most people," Georgina said, "weren't just shepherded out of a public event by someone who hasn't told them where they're going or why they specifically are the one doing the shepherding." She turned to look at him directly. In the moving dark of the car, his face was all contrast. The sharp lines softened slightly, the guarded quality somehow more visible without the public setting around it, like a frame that had been removed from a painting. "Who are you, Min-ho, actually?" He looked at her for a moment, then back at the window. "The kind of person," he said, "who knows when the Busan crew has someone marked." "And why do you know that?" "Because I know everything that happens in this city." It wasn't arrogance. That was the thing. She'd met arrogant men, and arrogance had a particular quality, a performance to it, a need for the audience to register the claim. This was simply a statement of fact, delivered the way you'd deliver a weather report. It made it more believable and more chilling than any swagger could have. "You're not police," she said. "No." "You're not government." "No." "Then what?" "Georgina," her name in his mouth, the first time he'd used it, the syllables landing with a weight she wasn't prepared for. "There are questions that have answers that will complicate your life. I would recommend you decide first whether you want that complication." She held his gaze. "I'm already complicated. Answer the question." Something shifted in him, fractional, like a door not opening but acknowledging the knock. "I run things," he said simply. "In this city, the kind of things that don't appear in any official record." The silence that followed was her processing this, and him watching her process it with the expression of someone waiting for a particular reaction. Expecting fear, perhaps, or the particular moral withdrawal that people performed when confronted with certain realities. She did neither. "Okay," she said. He blinked, barely, but she caught it. "That's your response." "What response were you expecting?" "Something more alarmed." "I grew up in Lagos," she said. "Spent 6 years in London financial compliance, where I watched entirely legal institutions do entirely illegal things with everyone's full knowledge and no consequences. And I've been living in Seoul for 18 months learning that every city in the world has a layer underneath it that the surface layer pretends not to see." She settled back against the seat. "I'm not naive, Min-ho. I just also don't have time to be dramatic about reality." He was looking at her now with something she hadn't seen from him yet. Not the calculation, not the controlled assessment. Something that lived underneath those things. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "I didn't say that." "Then you are." "I said I'm not naive. Fear and naivety are different things. I'm cautious about you. I'm also aware that you made a choice tonight that cost you something, attention, exposure, whatever the currency is in your world, and you didn't have to. I had reasons. I'm sure you did. She looked at the city sliding past. Tell me about the Busan crew. What do they actually think I know? The car turned onto a wider street. Min-ho was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. 3 years ago, he said, a compliance officer in London began flagging unusual transaction patterns from a shell company registered in Accra. The company was a front. The flagging triggered an Interpol inquiry. The inquiry eventually reached Seoul. He paused. The people who own that shell company have long memories and a low tolerance for loose ends. Georgina felt cold move through her slowly, like something being poured. I flagged hundreds of companies, she said. It was my job. I know. I didn't even know what I was flagging half the time. I was looking for patterns, not. She stopped. The full implication arrived, the way the worst realizations always did, not crashing, but settling quietly with terrible precision. They've been watching me for 3 years. Watching, waiting to determine intent. Tonight something changed in their calculus. He glanced at her. The Interpol approached 3 months ago. Someone talked about it. It reached them. So they think I'm about to cooperate. Yes. Because of information I don't even have. Intent matters more than information, in their world. She pressed her fingers together in her lap. Her heart was doing something loud and uncooperative in her chest, but she refused to let it reach her face. This was something her father had taught her, a man who had negotiated contracts in 5 countries with a handshake and a hard stare. Never let a table see you flinch. Flinch on the inside. Handle it there, but keep your face. She was handling it, inside, barely. What happens now? She asked. Tonight, you don't go back to your apartment. You don't know where my apartment is. He looked at her with the patience of a man who had just explained, 2 minutes ago, that he knew everything that happened in this city. Right, she said, of course. I have a secured property in Yongsan. You'll stay there until I can determine the scope of what the Busan crew is planning and close it. Close it, she repeated. What does that mean? It means it will stop being a problem. The careful vagueness of it, the language of a man who had learned to speak around things. And I'm supposed to simply trust you, she said. A man I met 40 minutes ago over a forged bronze sculpture. You don't have to trust me. His voice was even. You can get out of this car right now, take a taxi back to your apartment, and wait for what happens next. He looked at her steadily. I'm not holding you here. She looked at him. He looked back. And in the space between them, in the particular quality of that eye contact, the thing that was beginning to build like pressure in a sealed room, she understood something that she hadn't expected to understand tonight, hadn't expected to understand about this man, possibly hadn't expected to understand about herself. That the danger in this car was not the danger outside it. The danger in this car was the specific, slow, life-rearranging danger of beginning to see someone clearly. Because she was beginning to, past the surface of him, past the carefully constructed stillness, past the rule he lived by and the armor he'd built, and the things he'd done that she hadn't asked about and he hadn't offered. She was beginning to see the shape of who he was, and the shape was not what she'd expected when she'd walked into that hall in a red dress tonight. He was a man who had decided not to feel things. She recognized it because she had tried the same thing, briefly, after London. After the relationship that had ended in the particular way that some endings do, not loudly, but conclusively, leaving you wondering how you'd missed the signs, and then wondering if you'd simply chosen not to read them. She had tried not feeling for approximately 4 months before her body had rejected it, the way a body rejects a transplant that isn't the right match. Min-ho had been doing it for longer. She could tell. The not feeling had calcified in him, had become structure. She made her decision. The property in Yongsan, she said. Does it have good Wi-Fi? He stared at her. I have 3 reports due Friday. If I'm going to be sequestered in your safe house while you close things, I need reliable internet. For the second time tonight, something moved across Kang Min-ho's face that hadn't been there before. Something that, in a different life, in a lighter man, might have been the beginning of a smile. "It has good Wi-Fi," he said. Then fine. The car moved through Seoul. The city did what cities do, held them, indifferent and enormous, millions of lives pressing against each other in the dark, each one containing its own complete and unrepeatable story. Min-ho looked out the window. He had broken his rule tonight. He knew it. Not the spoken rule, not yet, but the underlying one, the one that said, do not move toward something. Do not let anything matter enough to move toward it. He had moved across a room. He had made a choice. And now this woman was in his car, and her name was in his mouth, and something in him, something he had believed was either dead or sufficiently buried, was making itself known with a persistence he had no protocol for. He thought about the photograph on his table, face down. He thought about the word endure asterisk pressed into the skin of his right hand. He thought about what it had cost him, the years of not feeling, the careful architecture of a life built without the vulnerability of caring. He thought, this is how it starts. Not with ceremony, not with permission, with a red dress, with a woman who responded to danger by asking about Wi-Fi, with the specific, gravity-defying absurdity of a moment that didn't care about your rules. He thought, you're in trouble, Min-ho. And for the first time in a very long time, longer than he could clearly remember, the thought was followed by something that was not dread. Something lighter. Something that had no business being there. Outside the car, Seoul blazed and hummed and breathed. And somewhere in Insadong, in an emptying cultural hall where a charity auction was concluding, and guests were retrieving their coats, a man in a gray suit pressed end on a phone call and looked toward the door through which Kang Min-ho and the woman in the red dress had exited together. He did not look angry. He looked satisfied, as if everything had gone exactly as planned. As if the real game, the one nobody in that room had been playing tonight except him, was only now beginning. Some lessons arrive quietly. They don't announce themselves. They sit down beside you at an auction wall and tell you the sculpture is a forgery, and by the time you understand what's actually happening, you're already in the car. Georgina had spent 30 years learning to trust her instincts. Min-ho had spent 20 years learning to silence his. Tonight, both of them were about to remember what it cost, and what it was worth, to feel something true.